posterity. So just know that. Don't say anything that could indict you. We still have a couple of minutes. So. Continue your discussion. Hello, if you're there. Oh, I already have 6 subscribers and 2 likes. Like and subscribe. Welcome. I can make money off of the stream. If I have 1,000 subscribers, I can start to make money. Okay, I have 23. So okay, we'll get there. I have 159 students. So if they all subscribe, they'll get their parents to subscribe. Yep.
And then we have 500 email accounts.
Yep. Yeah, like and subscribe. Dun, dun, dun. They're going to do both maybe next year.
Yes. Saying XOXO did not hurt.
We can write an essay.
I'm not allowed to talk about class.
You're not.
No, my dad said I can't talk.
That won't stop you.
Yes, I will.
Eli can still talk though.
That's what we probably win.
Yeah. I don't want all of that like genius aggression directed like towards you, know? So just get my direction.
Genius floats to the left.
No, I just said genius aggression.
I'm not doing what's up there.
The genius aggression flows to the left. That's
Look at
what
my
I
backpack.
said.
I want to flow to the back.
And go and sit in the back.
Oh my god, I don't.
You want it?
All of you.
Oh, you like
Dad, you disaster.
Rub my feet.
Happy first.
More careful about what I say.
They got your colored pencils? Oh, boy. Okay, 1 minute still, 1 minute still. Last word. Are you? That's good.
First day back to
This
straight away.
over here. Get some, that's good. This is good. That's up there. Couple of those. Get rid of that. Where am I?
Spanish.
Okay, there's the shit. You know Spanish?
Smells like
Spanish. I'm in good place. I'm in a good place. Get some ambient music on.
You're gonna get DMCA.
What, that? Flaming Lips? Neutral Milk Hotel? Spoon? Arcade Fire? You don't think? A little
You're
Rush?
the one that has flaming lips. They were,
Culture Club?
Hiroshima Battle for Control.
Hey, welcome, humans. Thanks for coming. Thanks for making English a part of your day. I'm not going in front of the camera. There you go. Stop this, click this, click this. Oh, no. Okay. Welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for making English a part of your day. And to my live fans, hey, love to have you here. Like and subscribe. You guys were at home yesterday. Tell me about that experience.
Actually,
Okay, that's chaos. But that's why we're here. We're here for chaos. Because we can do chaos. We can't do chaos on Zoom, right? So why is it not good? No, you said not good.
Yes, I did.
And it's gonna be a lot of pointing because we can't like ever register anything here. So
It was just the thing at the beginning where it could get you know.
yeah, I don't know how that works. I don't because I can't see what you see because every time I sign in, I have 4 monitors going right now to teach you. I have myself looking at myself with this screen behind on YouTube Live. Hi guys at home. And then I have this, which is your Google Classroom, where I think I can see comments that students are writing right now. So if you were to comment something, it would pop up here with just like a slight lag. What was that? Did you say chat? No? Okay, sorry. I'm between the mumbling, this projector going on, the air conditioning, and the fact that I have old ears. Then I have this one, and this is like the group me and the Infinite Campus, and then I have this one, and this one is that. And so it's quite a bit going on, which has nothing to do with why I entered this profession. Why did I enter this profession? No, because my wife wouldn't marry a waiter. So, yeah, we were dating, and she said, She said, I've had enough of this dating thing. And I said, okay. And she's like, and I won't marry a waiter. And she's like, what do you want to do? And I said, nothing. And she said, okay. And she said, well, you have the ability to go to college and become a teacher. And I'm like, oh, that's easy, because you've all watched teachers for 12 years for 6 hours a day. If you had like watched a dental hygienist for like 7 hours a day, every single, 180 days a year for the last like 12 years, you could be like, I can do that. That's why everybody thinks they can teach, is because it's the profession you've observed the most. You've watched the person flying, 747s for 7 hours a day for 12 years. You'd probably like, I could. Yeah. My wife's husband. No, that's me. My wife's friend's husband flies those big jets. And I asked him. I said, if you, because he flies to like Colombia or something like that, and not for that. And and I asked him, I'm like, one time, I'm like, if you fell asleep, what would happen in the middle of the flight? And he said, the plane would land. And I said, oh, okay. So when we're amazed that like our cars can like parallel park, does anybody have one of those? The cars that press the button and parallel park.
We are significantly too young.
No. Well, like you might have like that rich uncle or something. Who has the rich uncle? Anybody have the rich uncle? Wealthy uncle?
I don't know.
You have a poor uncle? Do you have an uncle that you don't want to sit next to at Thanksgiving? Because it's just awkward, and they might. Okay, all right. So that has nothing. Oh, hey, and to my fans at home. No, do you see how I totally ignored that? Did I just ignore you people yesterday? I don't know. You probably didn't even watch it. Okay. Okay, so I'll stand here. Hi. Good morning. Thanks for coming. Thanks for making English part of your day. My name is Mr. Friesen. I'll be your teacher for the day. I have a poem to start things off. The poem today is called, Do You Have Any Advice for Those of Us Just Starting Out? And this by Ron. And Ron actually told us how to pronounce his name. I would say this is Cortege, but it's Ron Kirchie. So Ron Kirchie has a poem called, Do You Have Any Advice for Those of Us Just Starting Out? And it goes just like this. Give up sitting dutifully at your desk. Leave your house or apartment. Go out into the world. It's all right to carry a notebook, but a cheap one is best, with pages of the color of weak tea. And on the front, a kitten or a spaceship. Avoid any enclosed space where more than 3 people are wearing turtlenecks. Beware any snow-covered chalet with deer tracks across the muffled tennis courts. Not surprising, the libraries are a good place to write. And the perfect place in the library is near an aisle where a child a year or 2 old is playing as his mother browses the ranks of the dead. Often he will pull books from the bottom shelf. The title, the author's name, the brooding photo on the flap mean nothing. Red book on black, gray book on brown, he builds a tower. And the higher it gets, the wider he grins. You who ask for advice, listen. When the tower falls, be like that child. Laugh so loud, everybody in the world frowns and says, shh, then start again. Can you guys say? Nicely done. So what we're going to do today, the agenda is, I'm going to take attendance. We say welcome and do a poem every day. Then I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to watch a movie today. It's my understanding, give me some feedback. I provide this slideshow for you. So if I put in things like movies or handouts or inside the Google Classroom, everything I blow up here that you can't see, hopefully you have access to at home. Okay, maybe we should talk for a minute. What can I do better or different during this hybrid model than what I did yesterday? Other than make it so you can chat in the YouTube live. Hey, if you're at home right now, say something in the chat so I can figure out if you know how to say something in the chat. Hi, who are you?
I'm Gabe.
Hi, Gabe.
Maybe that's just, or this is just me, but for the YouTube chat, it wouldn't work.
Okay.
I wasn't technically a registered channel, even though I had signed in and everything.
Right.
So maybe that was just me.
So here's what I think, and no, here I don't know. So what I heard are different things. One is I heard that I had not approved the channel. So I went on as the user and made Jeff Go Schools like my channel for everybody. So I had approved my channel. But I also heard that if you're signed in with your Jeffco account, you can't comment. Is that true? Was anybody ever able to comment on your Jeffco account?
I think so.
I think so, yeah. There's also a thing on your account where you scroll down. This is going to make lots of noise. Maybe I'll turn it off. Yesterday, I'm a person who prides himself on keeping his email box empty. So when I receive an email, I file it. So if I need to, I'm a student sponsor of Student Senate. So when I need to find out something about prom, what I do is I go to my email, to my I have a Jeffco box, and then I have a Senate folder inside that, and then inside the Senate folder I have a prom folder, and inside that prom folder I have a prom 2020 folder. for the prom that didn't happen. And inside there are emails. And that's how I know where to find things. Now, a lot of you guys would just, like maybe just search your emails for things that are in there. So I keep under 20 emails every day. So when I, like in the morning, sometime during the middle of the day and at night, I always go into my email like 3 times a day. And every single thing I get, I either delete it, I file it because it's something that I want to keep, or I deal with it. I do one of those 3 things with every single email I get. Under 20, it was between 5th hour and 7th hour yesterday, 177 emails in my email box. And then I had deleted already after 1st hour and 3rd hour because every single time somebody says something on Google Chat or a Google Classroom or YouTube posts a video or anything, I get every single time something posts, I get every single thing all day. And so I'm spending my life wading through emails. So Gabe, good question. I don't know. On your account, I believe near the bottom, you can, under your settings, turn off this restriction mode on your own. And I'm seeing nods. I believe that's how it works, is I believe you can turn off your own level of restrictions on your thing. And I think that's what it is. Did you guys hear that at home? Like and subscribe. Kate said hello from Canada. Nice. Okay, this is how I know at home you have a question. Okay, so at home, if you have a question, I'll see it right here or I'll see it right here, and hopefully that's how you communicate. But otherwise, it's a pretty passive experience at home. So that was one thing. What else about the experience at home can I change to different? What are some of your other teachers doing that you're so happy I'm not doing? What are some of your other teachers doing that you would like me to see? Yeah, what's your name?
Yesterday, there was 2 times where you turned to discuss in the classroom, and when you're at home and there's no one around you, it's just kind of a blank spot.
It is.
Is that just kind of the plan, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually got an email from the principal yesterday that said, it says, worry about the students in your room. The ones at home will figure it out. It's a subpar experience at home.
Okay.
We are the only school district that I know of that is doing this. Other school districts are either 100% remote, or they're slamming all the kids in, or what they're doing is they're just putting up this thing on, like, I would just give you work and say, do this on your off days. But this whole idea that half of you are supposed to be here at the same time is just crazy. This is an impossible job. Yesterday was literally, take away the shooting years that I was here, but yesterday was literally one of the 5 worst days I've ever had teaching this building, without a doubt. So today will hopefully be in the top 5 as well.
Stuff like that.
No. It's the first day in the building with your senior year, though. Seniors. What else? Anything else? Let's take attendance. Why don't you introduce yourself? I know some of you because I'm trying to associate your eyes and forehead with your name, okay, which is a little tricky. So here we go. Who are you? Go. Let's just start over here. And I want you to introduce yourself, even though you think I know who you are, because maybe other people in the room don't know who you are. Go.
Oh, I'm Jacob Moran.
Thank you, Jacob.
I'm Danielle.
And if you guys could do first and last names, that just helps me with alphabet, because my roster is by your last names. Okay? Welcome.
I'm Greg Zaharis.
Thank you.
I'm Stephen Woodrow.
Welcome.
I'm Eli Menudas.
Thank you. Cross that out.
I'm Grace Scott.
Thank you.
I'm Nev Schneider.
Welcome. Hello.
I'm Juliet Reed.
Hi, Juliet. Welcome.
I'm Ella Myers.
Okay.
I'm April Friesen.
Worst day of your school history. Welcome. Yes.
Ellie Springer.
Lily Springer and
Lily Bird.
Lily Berg. And we already heard from
David Rowe.
Oh, there you are. Perfect. So sweet. I'm assuming you're here. I have no idea. So for those of you who are at home right now, and when you're not at home, there's 2 questions a day. There's one at the beginning of the period, one at the end of the period. Okay. If you're here, I just marked you're here. And so if you're the kind of person that wants to, if you want to make sure, it really doesn't bother me if you don't, but it actually kind of cleans up my Google Classroom, because Google Classroom is chaos, right, Nev? There's incredible number of boxes on there, and it's super easy if you can just see really quickly, everybody turned it in. So like, if you wouldn't mind just answering the hello and goodbye questions for when you're here and when you're not here. And that's a whopping 2 days a week. Okay, so it's just today and yesterday. Next week, I guess it'll be Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. You have to do that. You'll have to do some little indication that you checked my website on Friday, but we'll deal with that later. Who knows if we'll even have school next week, right? All right, we good? Anybody have comments, questions, anything to start the day? All right, so here's what we're going to do today. Talk about the agenda, talk about policies. We did that. I hope you guys watched just a really quick video here for a couple of minutes by a curator of horology, and then all we're going to do is talk about Tinkers the entire period. Kind of look ahead to what you should be doing. Right now, it's just the digging into the book, and that's how this class works. We just dig into books for like 2-3 weeks, and then you have to write a bunch of papers. And during the papers, you're happy for the work that you're doing now. I have a feeling none of you will be satisfied with your Tinkers paper, okay? And that's okay, because I'm asking you to do something complicated. I'm asking you to take a book that's by nature complex and then do something incredibly complex with it, which is to talk about how a image, why don't I teach right here? Talk about how an image, I don't like to teach here because I don't like to look at myself, but how an image creates a theme, and then that theme is complex by nature. So some of you will be trying to unravel the nature of identity by looking at how identity, although it seems to be forged by the things we come in contact with, it's actually created through the false stories of our existence. And I'll be like, okay, so your identity is built through the false stories that people tell about you. And I'm like, and how did you figure that out? And you're like, I looked at all of the ice images in the book. And I'll be like, and the ice images made you realize that about identity? And you're going to be like, yeah. And I'll be like, how? And you're like, here is my paper. Okay, so your paper is going to be on the surface, something that somebody's like, huh. Somebody's going to say, like, I looked at all the insect imagery, yeah? And what does the insect imagery tell you? And you're like, the insect imagery told me that at the heart of chaos is order. And I'm like, really? Do you see how that's different than you saying, I looked at all the clock imagery? Yeah. What did you find out? It talked to me about how time works. And I'm like, duh. You know, so that's the only paper you should not write is clock imagery to time. If you want to look at all the clock imagery, the gears and the pinions and the arbors and the wheels and the bells and the gongs and the concordance of the chiming, and you want to look at all that imagery that activates your sight as you see the gears working together, and your ears as you hear the clocks ticking, and even the feel of the cold metal. If you want to look at all that imagery and tell me that that imagery helped you understand something about the nature of legacy and how legacy is actually the antithesis of mortality, I'd be like, oh, that could be kind of fun for me to read. Makes sense a little bit? So while you're reading, look for images, think about the book, and then be looking for a cool passage. But before we do that, curator of horology, okay? Now, you may not know what you want to do with the rest of your life. If you do know what you want to do with the rest of your life, that's great. If you're like me in college, you had no plans, no goals. If I had seen this video when I was in college, I would be like, that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. So there is a series of videos from the British Museum in London. You think that guy looks British?
Visibly so.
Don't judge. There's a fella, and they do this little thing where they go to the curators of the British Museum and the paleontologist talks and whatever. Well, guess what? The horologist speaks. So if you want to be a professional horologist, here is your model. Ready? Here we go.
That's a clock, isn't it?
Oh, sorry. You got it. No. You have to hear this, baby. All right, here we go.
He says in
Look at this. Look at it. Here's another video. Look at how to take a clock apart, you know? And then he talks about the night clocks. Oh, we should do this one. How to take a clock apart.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this one.
Hello, I'm Oliver Cook. I'm a curator of horology here at the British Museum, and welcome to my corner. Today I'm going to go through how a clock works, and to do this I'm going to introduce you to this clock, which is a clock that's nearly entirely made of wood. It was made in 1688 in Davos in Switzerland. Now to do this, we usually like to break it down into 5 elements. Energy, wheels, escapement, controller, and indicator. 5 elements. So let us start with energy, our power source. A clock is a machine. All machines need a source of power. There is no such thing as perpetual energy. And in this case, this clock is driven by a weight. And when we hang the weight on the hook, the clock starts ticking. Now, weights are a very good source of energy.
Starting to get boring.
Drawn down by the constant force of gravity, they provide a clock with a very constant supply of power, which is what a clock needs to be as accurate as possible. When we wind the clock, this is very simple. Tug on the counterweight. This is just there to keep things in place.
I think I mentioned that in the book, the book begins 8 days before he died, George Washington Crosby began to hallucinate. The average time it takes the clock that is wound to wind down is 8 days. And so that's the time frame for a clock, because it used to have to wind your clocks weekly. And so if you wind it every Sunday, you'd be okay, because it could go 8 days. Anyway, shall we keep going?
This is, because this is the clock. Right next to this side of this central bar, we have what's called the going train. And
These are all in the book.
that is responsible for the timekeeping of the clock. Every clock and mechanical watch has a going train. And on the right-hand side here, we have the striking train. And that's a mechanism for sounding the bell. But let's talk about the going train first, the timekeeping side of things. So we've talked about our source of energy. That weight is pulling down on this cord and it's trying to drive this pulley round. And that wheel there is in fact moving very, very slowly and we can't see it. But the wheel it's meshing with, our second wheel in the train, you can see moving. And it's meshing just here at the top of the wheel with this very small wheel that we call a pinion, all made in wood. In this wheel of many teeth, we're driving this small wheel, this pinion, with not many teeth. So this pinion's got about 7 leaves on it, 7 teeth on it. This big wheel only has to move 7 teeth to send this wheel around a complete revolution. And that's what's happening here. We're accelerating the speed of this wheel. We can see it's moving quicker here, and the last wheel in our train, the escape wheel, which we'll come to next, is moving around visibly quicker again. And the reason we want to do that,
We got to get to the escape
we want the
wheel.
weight to descend slowly. We want the clock to last for a sensible amount of time between windings. Up at the business end of the clock, if you like, on our third element, the escape and controller, our fourth element, things happen more quickly. This is just the nature of the laws of physics and Mother Nature. So we have to increase this speed, and this is why we have our wheels, our second element. And now we move on to element 3, the escapement. Now the escapement is the tick-tock that you hear in the clock or mechanical watch. It's the beating heart of a clock, if you like.
This is the key.
And what's happening here, vertically in here, we have a metal shaft. There is some metal in this clock. And on that shaft are 2 flag-like pieces, which we call pallets, and they're doing this. And so the teeth of the escape wheel, or the pins in this case, are alternately pushing these pallets one way than the other, one way than the other. And that's the tick-tock you hear, are those pins sliding up one place into another. In horology, the louder that tick-tock, the worse, because the louder it is, the more energy is being wasted. And a good clock should have a quiet tick-tock, generally speaking. What's happening is this rotational mode.
All right, that's enough of that. Okay, so all we're going to do is talk about tinkers today. But I want to start with this idea, because that's the book. The book is built on this general kind of metaphor of a clock. And so if you guys could open up your hymnals. What we're going to start with today is on page, I believe, 20. Well, it's a different page for you guys. It's on page, sorry, I got to find. Nope. It's on page, it'd be 25 in your hymnal. On page 25 in your hymnal. On page 25 is the first, and let me take this away. So if I turn this off, that way I can write words on the board. On page 25 in your hymnal is the first of the Reverend Kenner Davenport sections. No, it's not. Sorry. It's actually the first time that George is described as fixing a clock. Okay? And so essentially we have this kind of procedural way of repairing a clock. We talked yesterday when you were at home about some of the themes of this book. One of the themes of this book is this tension between reconstruction and deconstruction. And at the beginning of the book, George's house is deconstructed. Okay, his memories of his life are deconstructed, and he's hoping to bring things together. You have the shattered mosaic, which he hope stops moving, and then his entire job is to take deconstructed clocks and reconstruct them, not build them initially, but build them again, because this whole book is about cycles of things that have been done before. So on page 11, on page, what is it, 25 for you. He starts fixing clocks. 5 lines from the top of page 25. It says he would replace the worn tooth on a strike wheel by hand. And then what we have is this really procedural way of him operating on a clock. And it's very much like surgical in many ways, because it's a series of direct orders. It's written in the imperative, you know? Lay the clock face down, unscrew the screws, maybe just pull them from the cedar to the walnut case, threads long since turned to wood dust from the mandrels. Lift off the back of the clock like the lid of a treasure chest. So when you write about these things, let's say you pick a passage, you want to walk through every single line of it. So you would walk through the sentences in the imperative, and you talk about how we're inviting somebody to go through this enumerated procedure. You would talk about things like the simile of the lid of a treasure chest. So the idea that clocks possess within them something of value. This is a book about what we value, both in the material world, but also in the personal world. Then it says, bring the long-armed, there's personification, jeweler's lamp closer to just over your shoulder. So now we have the direct address of the reader. So we are absolutely breaking the wall. We're moving in this book from third-person perspective to second. And you know this book also uses first person's perspective. And then sometimes with the italics, you have first person inside first person. So you have somebody else's first person living in somebody else's first person. This book completely manipulates perspective. Because remember, what we know is to be truth is perhaps based on the way we see it. So if we want us to see this procedure, we need to be the one that's peering through this by this jeweler's lamp. More rules. Examine the dark brass. See the pinions gummed up with dirt and oil. Look at the blue and green and purple ripples of the metal hammered, bent, torched. Maybe a word like ripples jumps out to you. Because when I say ripples, if I walked in the room and said ripples, most people would automatically think of water, so that's water imagery right now. So why do we have ripples? This idea that something in blue and green and purple. If I told you right now, I want you to look at the blue and green and purple ripples in this book, you would automatically think of what? Probably the Borealis sections or something like that, right? So there's something in the incredible mechanical world of the clock that resonates with the ethereal world of the cosmos, perhaps. But anyway, it says, poke your finger into the clock, fiddle the, and ding, 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 escape wheel. And escape is a very big deal, because what's happening in this book right now is George is, I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen at the end of the book. George may or may not die. And when George may or may not dies, at the end of the book, he will be escaping. And the escape wheel that the horologist talked about, he said, this is the one, this is the key. Because what happens is, in a clock, the forces of nature, be they gravity, what else do clocks work on? You use a key to wind a spring, so you're working on the tensile force of like metal. Clocks also work by the atomic clock works on the variation in something. You guys do math or physics, science, right? It's like don't atoms vibrate or do something, right? And so atomic clocks work on the constancy of the vibration of atoms. I have no idea. Does anybody know how this works? Like how this tells time? What is causing this to tell time? Is there some sort of something? Because something has to be doing something in line with the physical laws of the universe to make this tell time. Do you guys know how this takes a picture? I totally used to understand cameras, right? You had a piece of film which would react to light, which was coated with chemicals, which then you would expose by opening a shutter, and the light would then create different things. I have no idea how this works, because this is all diodes or something. Does anybody know how this thing works? How it takes a picture? You do?
A bit.
How does it work? Because you could be the guy at the British Museum with the old phone going
please no.
Dad, I'm so glad you didn't do that, because then you would have never married Mom.
Well, that's okay. Anyway, go ahead.
I think how it works is it reacts to light. So
What reacts to light?
You're asking questions
See?
I don't quite know.
But it does react to light the same way. But what? Is it are there I don't know, something in there's something physical in this that's interacting with the physical world around it, some sort of diode or
Digital retina.
a digital retina, which is that? I don't know what that, yeah, anyway. Whole point of the story. But the escape wheel. I do know there's a thing in a clock called an escape wheel. And that escape wheel, he just said, was, did you see the escape wheel horologist dance, This escape wheel, what it's doing, and now you're going to say, what does this resonate with in the book? The escape wheel, forces of the natural world put pressure on the escape wheel until it gets to the point, dang, that it has to release. And it does that every second. Can you think of anything else in this book that pressure, boing, and it releases? It's like Howard's seizures. His seizures are that he becomes unhitched from the world and he goes up, blah, blah, blah. And what happens is in a clock, that's a fraction of a second, right? But how long does it take for Howard? And the answer is perhaps an eternity. Because where does Howard go when he goes into this seizure world?
He goes like infinity.
He goes in infinity. He knocks on that lightning door, right? Did you guys read that part? And then all of a sudden he's on the other side of the lightning door. And he is the king of the cosmos who needs Mars, right? And so there's this idea that the escape, and wait a minute, can you think of anybody else right now who is tensing and waiting for that ultimate release? This is George dying on his deathbed, right? And what is George looking for? Escape, right? Get out of here. And it says in the book, escape wheel. And this is the only parenthetical in this description. Every part perfectly named. Escape, the end of the machine. The place where the energy leaks out, breaks free, beats time. Is that George's end? You know, the ultimate idea that it's the end of his machine. It's where ultimately everything about him is leaking out. You guys probably noticed the word leak out was present, I think, one page earlier. Sorry. But leak, of course, is imagery of liquid like you have in this book. I don't know where I put it. It's on 21. Is that it? Yeah, it's on the top of 31 for you. It talks about the toxins are leaking from his cancer-clogged kidneys and body. Anyway, we're back on page 25 in your hymnal. Let's just finish this little section. Stick your nose closer. The metal smells tannic. So now we're getting this sensory overload of what we hear, what we see, what we smell. Read the names etched onto the works. And I love this because one of the themes in this book I don't think I've written on the book yet, written on the board yet, is one of the themes in this book is legacy. You know, we got a high school in Colorado named Legacy. Legacy is one of Dakota Ridge's values, is legacy. It's a great value. The idea of like, who are we and how do we resonate? You're all going to die, okay? Turn to the smart kid next to you and say, you're going to die.
You're gonna die.
Okay?
What?
Now turn to somebody else and say, you're going to die, okay?
You're gonna die.
And once you realize that, the world is okay. You go outside, somebody is bumped, you park in the parking lot for the first day of your senior year, you go out there and someone has run into your car, not left a note. Turns out the cameras are covered with snow and you don't know who did that. And what do? You say, that person's going to die, okay? And everything's okay because at the end of the day, you're die, but what do? You leave a legacy. And how do you leave your legacy? You put your name in. Ezra Bloxham, 1794. George E. Figs, 1832. Thomas Flockhart, 1912. See, you exist as a who because you are also meshed with a when. Because time is your identity. And then it says, lift the darkened works from the case, lower them into ammonia, lift them out, nose burning, eyes watering. I mean, this is this moment of intense physicality that you're ultimately, and there's that water imagery, right? Again, but the idea that the fire and the water, burn and water. Do you see how many times those things have been brought together in this book? The Haggard Country Wife section, all this fire and water are oppositional. And here it's within you at that moment, nose burning, eyes watering, and you see them shine and star through your tears. Celestial imagery, right? The cosmos, file the teeth, punch the bushings, load the springs, fix the clock, add your name. Super powerful little section there. And is it about fixing a clock? Yes. Is it about George's legacy? Probably. Do we have some imagery in there? Sure. So what you're going to do is you're going to pick one little passage from this book and you're just going to dig into it like crazy. If right now we had audio taped me and run me through like the do you guys know? There's these things on online where it'll take your words and transcribe them for you. If we just transcribed me talking about this section, how many pages did I just speak? I just spoke 3, 4, 5 pages probably, right? You can absolutely take a little bit of tinkers and say, in this passage, here are things the author does. What did I do? I talked about sentence structure. I talked about verb forms. I talked about personification. I talked about repetition. I talked about a simile. I talked about, I don't know what I talked about. I talked about imagery. But bottom line is you just mentioned those things. Comments, questions? Since we're here, let's just keep going. Look at right after the gap on 25. Tinker, tinker, tin, 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 tinambulation. There was a ring of pots and buckets. Does anybody know the poetic technique of tin, tin, tin? This onomatopoeia. So what are we doing? We're hearing this tin, 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 as Howard is perhaps hitting on the things that he's fixing, or maybe the pots are rattling as the wagon moves through. But we have that idea of this tin, 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 and tick, 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 and tick, tock, tock, and tick, tock, right? But the idea is the ring in Howard's ears. On the bottom of page 25, we should probably mention this. This is the first notion of seizure in the book. Now, if you've read more of the book, and after we talked a little bit about, this will be the perfect segue to what we're going to talk about today, because we're going to talk about Christmas dinner. The first mention we have of Christmas dinner is on page 25 near the bottom. It says, there was also a ring in Howard Crosby's ears, a ring that began at a distance and came closer until it sat. So we have that animism, the idea that this ring, this idea of what this thing is, this force is now perched in his brain and then burrowed into them. So we have this, that's not personification, by the way. Okay, personification is taking something that's not a person and making it into a person. What we have there is what we call animism, or even animation, which you guys think of Beauty and the Beast when I say. But animation is merely to make animate, animal, things that are inanimate, which are not moving. So this idea that a feeling could sit and burrow, those aren't personification, because they're just, yes, humans can burrow and humans can sit, but so can any form of animal. Anyway, his head thrummed on the top of 26 as if it were a clapper in a bell. What do we call that technique? Simile, right? So we're finding techniques as we go. Cold hopped onto the tips of his toes. Cold hopped, that would be animism as well. Tips of his toes, what are we getting there? Alliteration, which also resonates with the tin, tin, tinambulation, right? The certain sounds out of your mouth require you to stop the flow of air. T's and P's and B's and K's. That you either think about like a T right now, behind your mask, T. How do you stop the flow of air with a T? T. What exactly happens in your mouth?
Put your tongue
T.
on the roof of your mouth.
Your tongue on the roof of your mouth, T. And what do? You get a little breath behind there and T, you release. How similar is that to the escapement on the clock, right? That just builds up the pressure and it releases. How do you make a B sound? You put air behind your lips and then the release creates the B. Okay? What a K sound. How do you make a K sound?
Put your tongue on the back of the roof.
The back half, widen your tongue across the roof, the palate, release it. Things like that. Yes?
What was that podcast you listened to? It was like trucks.
Oh yeah, I'm going to talk to you guys about that later. There are like 7 ways to pronounce the letter T. And it's all about that. Yeah, and what April just brought up is the idea of, like, when you say like testament, like think about the word testament, say right now, where's the T go? Testament. Testament. And then do the word truck.
Truck.
And think about your tongue. Testament,
Testament.
truck.
Truck.
Your tongue does totally different things. Now say the word church.
Church.
And then say truck.
Truck.
See how similar your tongue is for a T sound and a CH sound, I don't know. But there's the idea that, like, when you actually analyze like poetry, because you were taught like, ooh, what is alliteration? It's repetition of the first letter in words. No, it's not. Alliteration is repetition of the initial sound. And the sound can be produced by different letters, Anyway, total tangent. Tangent, everyone? Tangent. Good. All right. Oh, I'm back in the book. Cold hopped on the tips of his toes and rode on the ripples. Alliteration, right? And also, what is tips of his toes and rode on the ripples? Do you see how that creates parallel rhythmic quality? Tips of his toes. Rode on the ripples. You could call that parallel structure. Anyway, to the ringing throughout his body till his teeth clattered, which is onomatopoeia, and his knees faltered, and he had to hug himself to keep from unraveling. That's such a great word. In order for something to become unraveled, deconstructed, it had to have been raveled, okay? What do you think of when you think of unraveling? What word does that automatically evoke? I mean, what does that automatically evoke? What unravels? Like string. And have we had the threads which are running through this, which are wound? Think about clocks that have springs that are raveled, right? And we unravel. To ravel is to wind again and again and again. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. But do you see what I'm doing, though? I'm picking apart every single word, phrase, whatever. That's what one of your papers is. You can do that, right? This was his aura, a cold halo. Anybody else have a halo in this book? Gilbert, remember the circumcrispid around his head, the flies? A cold halo of chemical energy that encircled him immediately before he was struck by a full seizure. What happens when Howard, yes, Howard. I sometimes get them confused. What happens when Howard has a seizure? Could you argue that Howard transcends this world and enters an ethereal plane? And guess who else gets to do that? Saints. Jesus. Do you see the religious imagery there? The idea of being encircled by a cold halo and being struck with a seizure. If you're walking along all of a sudden and you're like, and you fall on the ground and you wake up and you say, I saw a miracle. In the past, people that have seizures were seen as holy figures, correct? Because somehow they touch the ethereal plane. So now George is now he is now part of a circle because he has a halo around his head. He is hugging himself. The world is encircling him. And here he is. What a powerful moment. And then what does Paul Harding do right after that? Howard had epilepsy. You'll notice Harding does this a bunch. About a third of the way in or about half of the way in with his confusion, he just gives you this really direct statement and says, Howard had epilepsy. Now, that's the real story. That's the truth of Howard's condition. But maybe truth is actually much more than just the declarative nature. Maybe it's also the much more metaphorical. His wife, Kathleen, formerly Kathleen Black of the Quebec Blacks, from a reduced and stern branch tree of the family, cleared aside chairs and tables and led him to the middle of the kitchen floor. This is all going to be on your book on page 96, and this is where we're going next. Okay, not now, but we're going to go to the Christmas dinner seizure. So this is the first time we've seen this seizure. She wrapped a stick of pine on a napkin for him to bite so he could not swallow or chew off his tongue. If the fit came fast, she crammed the bare stick between his teeth, and he would wake to a mouthful of splintered wood, the taste of sap, his head feeling like similarly a glass jar full of old keys and rusty screws. Do you see how we're welcomed into the sound of what a seizure would feel like just through that single image of a jar with keys and screws? And this idea that she's from the branch of the family. She puts pine in his mouth. And do you guys see branch, pine, wood, and sap in just what I saw? Now, the power of the image might just not be in the words branch, pine, wood, and sap. Maybe it's in the words like splintered. In order for something to be splintered, maybe it comes in the word stern. I'm going to argue at this point, one thing in this book that happens, not literally, but spiritually, is I'm going to argue that Howard becomes a tree in this book. You have that? Howard actually is able to step into the fold of the forest and become a tree. And you're going to see this in the book. So does Howard's father. If you read chapter 3, you met Howard's father, kind of. And so does George. Remember when he takes the things, the medicine, and his legs turn hard, and his wife touches him and says, my husband, the table. So there's this idea of this unity in this book. Now, you don't get to say in your paper that Howard becomes a tree and human and nature become one. But you could say that this is a book about unifying forces, bringing things together. This is the idea that in this, I think I wrote this on the board yesterday, this book is full of opposites. And oftentimes the opposites repel each other, but sometimes the opposites attract, just like physics and magnetism would tell us. And then on the 26 at the bottom, right after the gap, to reassemble the dismantled clock. I'm going to shut up now because you could literally walk through the book like this. Anyway, this is the first Kenner Davenport section. This is the first of 4 of those, but that's sort of the theme of the book, right? Is to how to reassemble that which is disassembled. Okay. And that's the goal. So the question in this book is not, will George die? The central dramatic question of this book is probably, the clock is ticking. You got 8 days, buddy. Can you assemble your life before you die? Some of you will fall down an open manhole and die. You don't have that opportunity. But what if you were told right now you have 8 days? What if you're told you have 3 days? What if you're told you have an hour and a half? How do you assemble your broken life? Anyway, comments, questions? And for you guys at home, hey, my Patreon account is linked in the bottom. If you could that'd be awesome. You guys could go to page, I don't know, how about page 92? And I've talked way too much, so I'm going to make you guys talk to each other because that's part of why we're in school. So on page 92 in your hymnal, this is in chapter 2, and we're meeting George as a boy, and he's playing some playing some cribbage with his dad, and they're sitting on the kind of slumped and leaning house. There's a lovely description of the house on page 85. Lots of interesting architectural imagery in this book. And the house is kind of fallen over, and so the house is this kind of portrait of something moving to decay. This is a book about decay, for sure. But it also says that as the house falls, one part of the porch is falling and another part falls as well. And they lean upon each other in mutual, what's the phrase that it uses? Mutual something. Maybe. The mutual pull on each other causes them, which is that idea that you almost need this disarray to create, you almost need the things to fall in order for them to stand, which is a paradox. But anyway, he's playing cribbage with his dad, and it's going okay. And then his dad is, then George is like, building the mouse barge and burning dead animals, which is usually not something one wants one's children to discover one's children doing. And then you get to Howard out in the woods having these crazy fantasies of selling Crosby's till you get to page 92. 92 is probably the most central plot vignette. You could argue that any of the vignettes are important in this story. You could dig into any of them. But number 5, the 5th vignette in chapter 2 that starts on page 92, that's probably the central plot vignette, because this is the day where Howard has a seizure. If you want to do your little Freytag's pyramid, this is probably that moment, because this is the inciting incident that changes everything. It's the day that Howard unravels before his family. His mom has kept his seizure a secret up until now. Okay. Page 92. George experienced all but one of his father's seizures as rumors. He would find his mother leaning over rumpled, shaken father in a chair. There was spit in his father's hair and blood on his chin. His father sat snorting rapid breaths through his nose, looking first at the palms of his hands and then at the backs as he clenched and unclenched them the way a soldier might after a bomb had detonated in his trench, and was shocked to find himself still alive, possibly unharmed. George came to understand that this was because his father could tell when fits were coming, and always managed, with the help of George's mother, to get to a part of the house or yard where the children were absent, so they would not have to see him in the throes of a seizure. If one of the children happened along, Kathleen would say in a quiet voice, "You just go right back to where you came from. Father and I are busy." So here it is. The one time he and his brothers and sisters had watched their father have a grand mal seizure was at Christmas dinner 1926. There's that Harding doing that again, putting this really declarative sentence a little bit in, saying exactly what is going on. Do you see how you have who, what, when, where there? All these questions that this book kind of refuses to answer. If you want a marker in this book, you can't get any clearer. Christmas dinner in their house, brothers and sisters present, and it's a grand mal seizure. Here we go. If you want a marker, this is 12:25:26 dinner time. It's super precise of a moment. And oh yeah, by the way, Christmas dinner. We didn't talk about the first words in the book. George Washington. Now we have Christmas dinner. This interesting idea of fathers and children and births and the legacy, because what we have here is one of the more famous passing of generations in Western Civ, right? So on page 93, I'm not going to talk about it. We have this portrait of the perfect dinner, because mom has cooked the Christmas meal and there's a crust of brown sugar and molasses, and Buddy the dog is there, and Russell the cat is there, and mom and dad, and there's a Father Howard standing with a newly sharpened knife in front of the table, and he's going to be cutting the ham, and everyone is staring in admiration, and everything is there until all of a sudden Howard hitches, and the moment is killed. So this kind of perfect, picturesque American portrait of the perfect Christmas dinner is harmed, and the Rockwellian view we have is destroyed. And here's the part you're going to do with the smart kids next to you. Top of 84. Howard lifted, first new paragraph. I'm going to have you turn to the smart kid next to you and talk about what you notice in the way that Harding writes. Remember, we don't necessarily care about what's going on. Does anybody know what's going on in this passage? On Christmas dinner of 1926, Howard will have a seizure in front of his family. Check. Now we're going to get to how does Paul Harding write, and why are and what are some of the larger ideas that emerge in this. Okay, page 94, first new paragraph. I'm going to have you turn to the smart kid next to you and talk about what you noticed, but I want us all to hear it out loud. Howard lifted a daub of potato with his